When you think about it, it's pretty amazing how transgenderism is showing up all over our culture. This includes YouTube and the YouTuber, Mr. Beast. Most in the YouTube world have heard or seen that Mr. Beast's good friend and co-host, Chris Tyson, has decided to transition. Now, when you're pretty much getting more views than nearly anyone else on the planet, your life is enormously public, and people are going to weigh in. And when your very public personal life is a living, breathing acting out of an ideology, people should weigh in. Now, I think there's a lot to say from a biblical standpoint about that situation, and we'll be posting a couple of sermons on our channel soon, and we'll be talking about the gender question in depth. So keep your eye out for those. But here I'd like to focus on one key and very important point in the Mr. Beast situation. Now, Mr. Beast ran a live stream of him and the team recently, and this included Chris, since the time he made it public that he was transitioning. But from what I understand, many in the audience felt like the interaction between the team was awkward and lacked the easy interplay that team is known for. That's important because it illustrates an often overlooked problem inside the trans movement, what I would simply call, what about the old person? And here's what I mean. Recently, I had the privilege of sitting down and getting to know a young woman who transitioned to a man for a couple of years, but then detransitioned back to a woman. And it was really fascinating learning her motivations and her experiences. Now, I know that's just her experience, but people are people, and some things I would venture are pretty universal. Now, she told me about how her grandma reacted. Now, her grandma was against it, and they butted heads over it, right? But her grandma wasn't against it on religious grounds or because she's a Matt Walsh fan. She was against it for a pretty profound reason. To tell this story, I'll call my friend as a woman, Julie. Okay, so here's why her grandma didn't want her to transition. Because she loved Julie. She's a grandma. Of course, she adores her granddaughter. That's what grandmas do. That's what grandpas do. I know that because I am one. My love for my grandkids is like next level type stuff. And this is what Julie's grandma asked her, quote, "Why do you hate Julie so much that you want to get rid of her?" I love Julie. I don't want to lose her. And this wasn't about being anti-trans. It was about being pro-Julie. So there's something profound about that because the entire claim that Chris has made, he is now becoming his true self. And those are his words, meaning his identity as a man was not his true self. He literally is becoming someone else. But the older self is the one that people got to know up until this point. And then whether we like it or not, our parents, our grandparents, friends, and family know us from birth, in the case of parents and grandparents anyway, as a boy or a girl. Now, this is now 20 plus years later. Chris and Mr. Beast have done life together as two guys growing and learning. But according to Chris, none of that was his true self. This is important because inside trans ideology, the term used for your older self, the identity you left, is literally called dead name. Now, if you call someone by their original name, the name you knew them as, you're referring to someone who is now dead. Now, that person you loved as a friend or a son or a daughter has died, or at least at the very least is very different. Now, Chris is still in the show, but she is, in theory, a different person in a very meaningful way. In some ways, a person Mr. Beast and the rest of the team really don't know, according to Chris himself, because only now is she being her true self. Now, they all say Chris is their friend, but that's technically not true, at least in the same way that it used to be. So there's a new person in the room, someone they have to get to know. So naturally, the chemistry's off. People can sense it because the guys in that room can sense it. Now, some say this is splitting hairs or being too literal, but no, it's going right along with the entire ideology. Chris hasn't been his true self as a man who even got married and had a kid. He's now being his actual real self, and that is, by definition, different. His friends don't know how that's different. He probably doesn't even know how that's different. In many ways, I kind of feel sorry for Mr. Beast. He lost his friend. He lost someone he loves. He still has him or her on one hand, but not on the other. My theory is, as supportive as Jimmy wants to be, he's silently grieving a loss. Here's another thing my detransition friend said to me. Part of the attraction of transitioning for her was getting to be a new person. She didn't like the old person. But after living as a man for a couple of years, she noticed I'm really the same person. I just look different to other people. And in her case, that was disillusioning. It reminds me of the old adage, remember, wherever you go, you take yourself with you. Hope that helps. See you next time.